On Father's Day evening, while my family enjoyed a lavish dinner upstairs, I was unfolding a cot in the basement. "If you want to stay here, pay $900 a month," my son said coldly. I stayed silent. 2 hours later, my late wife's brother stopped by and froze when he saw where I was sleeping. "Wait, isn't this your house too? Why are you paying to sleep in a basement?" Before I could answer, he pulled a dusty bundle of bank letters from behind the mail organizer by the door. The moment he read the first page, the color drained from his face. This story isn't easy, but it's real in ways that matter. Before we begin, drop a comment. Have you ever had to document something quietly, waiting for the right moment? Your perspective matters here. Some details are fictionalized to protect privacy and strengthen the lesson. What matters most is the core truth. What happens when silence becomes strategy? That Father's Day evening, the smell of Wagyu steak and $200 Bordeaux drifted across the upper level of my son's Portland villa, while my corner only smelled of cold, congealed mashed potatoes. I am Lester Thornton, 60 years old, with failing eyesight and a pocket loop perpetually tucked in my left breast shirt pocket. And I sat in the peeling plastic chair by the basement door where I had eaten every meal for 3 months. The oak dining table stood 15 feet away. My son Corbin, 32 years old, with perfectly gelled hair and a silk tie that cost more than my weekly groceries, tossed plastic utensils onto my table without making eye contact. "Dad, eat up and clean the kitchen after," he said. "Letting you sit upstairs today is already a favor." Solene, my daughter-in-law at 28, held her gold-plated utility knife mid-unboxing, while her phone sat propped on a tripod streaming to 180,000 followers. She tilted the screen toward my corner, giggling. "Everyone we're so generous gave him a private basement level." She adjusted the angle. "Some people don't even do that." Celeste Voss, 54. Solene's mother wore a long dress and fake pearls that clicked when she gestured, raising her wine glass to ask loudly why self-respecting people don't check themselves into care homes instead of leeching off their children. Her voice carried practiced projection. I kept my eyes on the mashed potatoes. My grandson Silas, 4 years old, with untied shoelaces, sat at the main table, kicking the leg of his chair, completely unaware. He asked if Grandpa could have some steak too. Solene handed him a tablet without answering. I paid $1,200 a month to live in that basement. Corbin had raised it from $900 just last month, explaining that Portland real estate was expensive, and family or not, everyone pays their share. I'd signed the revised lease at this same plastic table while they ate Thai takeout. The pen had been out of ink. Corbin handed me a Sharpie. The potatoes tasted like paste. I ate them anyway, and when Celeste launched into a story about a neighbor who'd had the decency to move into Rosewood Care Home before becoming a burden, I pressed down too hard and snapped the plastic fork in half. Nobody noticed. I pulled the brown leather notebook from my jacket pocket and wrote down what Celeste had just said word for word with the time 6:47 p.m. Then Solene's camera comment, then Corbin's kitchen order. My handwriting still worked even when my distance vision didn't. I wrote down every word, not because I was hurt, because I was already counting. The meal ended, the way meals always ended. Corbin stacked plates and told me to handle it. Celeste dropped her napkin on the floor, looked at it, then walked away. Solene grabbed her phone and they moved into the living room to watch Silas open presents I hadn't been invited to buy. I ran hot water in the sink, scraping béarnaise into the disposal, listening to my son laugh at something on television. The kitchen window reflected my face, deep lines, thinning gray hair, the loop outlined in my pocket. I looked like a man people move into basements. The front door opened at 8:45. Vernon Gallagher, 58, my late wife Margaret's older brother with large hands and a voice that could fill a construction site, arrived carrying a store-bought pumpkin pie and a question already forming in his eyes. He'd built Gallagher Financial Services from a two-desk accounting firm into a regional outfit with 12 employees and a licensed CPA on staff himself. 30 years of watching numbers tell the truth about people. He stopped 3 steps into the dining room. His gaze moved from the empty oak table to the plastic one by the basement door, still cluttered with my plate and bent fork. "Lester," his voice dropped. "What the hell is this?" Corbin came out smiling, explaining that Dad preferred eating in his own space, that it was easier for everyone, that Dad needed accommodations. Vernon's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Not then, not in front of them. He set the pie down, made small talk for 6 minutes, then caught my eye and tilted his head toward the hallway. I followed him into the dim corridor near the entryway where the mail organizer sat mounted beside the door. "How long has this been going on?" Vernon's whisper came out furious. 3 months, I said, "since Margaret died." 3 months of that table, that... He gestured toward the plastic chair, his hand sweeping too wide, knocking against the mail organizer. A stack of old magazines shifted, started to slide. Vernon caught them halfway down, and that's when we both saw what had been tucked behind a bundle of envelopes, edges worn, held together with a rubber band. "You need to understand something about watchmakers," we notice when gears don't align. Vernon pulled the stack free. Every envelope was addressed to Walter Lester Thornton, my full legal name. The return addresses varied. Pacific Northwest Credit Union, Cascade Regional Bank, Multnomah County Records. The postmarks ranged across 5 weeks. None had been opened. None had made it to me. "They're hiding your mail," Vernon said, his voice hollow. "Jesus Christ, Lester, they're hiding your mail." He tore open the top envelope, the one from Pacific Northwest Credit Union, dated 5 weeks ago. Vernon's hands started to shake as he read the letter, inside his face going pale in the dim hallway light. Mine didn't shake. That was the difference between us and exactly why I needed him. I already knew what we'd find. I'd been counting since Margaret's funeral, counting since the first time Corbin handed me a lease for my own son's basement, counting since Solene called me generous charity to 180,000 strangers. The letter was from a credit union I'd never heard of, addressed to this house. Vernon's hand trembled, holding it up to the light. The amount printed inside would change everything, but first he needed to see where the money I'd already paid had actually gone. Vernon spread the letter open under the hallway's amber light, and the first number he read aloud made him stop breathing. "Account balance as of May 15th, 2024, $150,000. His voice came out strangled. "Beneficiary Lester Thornton. Trust established by Margaret A. Thornton, 2019. May 15th, the day after Margaret's funeral. The day Corbin had driven me to his villa with my suitcase and a promise that family takes care of family. The day this envelope had been mailed to his address, because I'd already moved in, because I had nowhere else to go, because my wife of 41 years was gone and our son said the house was too big for me alone." Vernon's hands shook, holding the paper. Mine stayed steady as I took it from him, reading the rest under the dim bulb. "Pacific Northwest Credit Union. Offline trust account. Established December 2019, 5 years ago, when Margaret still had her full memory and clear eyes. Triggered automatically the month I turned 60. Accessible with identification and beneficiary verification at any branch location." Margaret had left me a door. I turned the envelope over, studying the crumpled edges, the forwarding sticker partially torn. The postmark read, April 22nd, 2024. This was the 4th mailing attempt. I could see where previous stickers had been peeled away, leaving adhesive residue. 4 times they'd tried to reach me. 4 times someone had made sure I never saw it. "Lester, this is yours. Margaret left you a way out." Vernon's voice cracked. "We need to..." He took a step toward the living room where I could hear Corbin's laugh and Solene's voice narrating something to her phone. Vernon's face had gone red, his jaw tight, his large hands clenched. He was going to storm in there. He was going to shout. He was going to ruin everything. I put my hand on his shoulder firm enough that he stopped. "Not tonight," I said. My voice came out flat as watch crystal. "If we break this now, they'll hide everything deeper. Let them think they've already won." "They stole," Vernon started, but I squeezed his shoulder harder. "They think they're stealing," I said. "There's a difference." I folded the letter, slipped it into my jacket pocket beside my notebook, and collected the rest of the hidden envelopes, 7 in total, ranging from credit unions to county records to legal notices I hadn't been allowed to see. Vernon watched me, his breath coming hard, his construction site voice reduced to a furious whisper. "So we do nothing, we just let them—" "We do nothing tonight," I said. "Tomorrow's different." I led him through the kitchen, past the cleaned counters and the pie still sitting untouched on the island, down the narrow stairs to the basement. The door at the bottom opened onto my room, a cot with thin sheets, a plastic dresser, a single desk lamp, and the smell of mildew that never quite left no matter how often I ran the dehumidifier. This was what $1,200 a month bought in my son's house. Margaret had left me a door. They had bricked it over one envelope at a time, but they forgot something. I fix things for a living. Vernon pulled out his phone, his jaw still working with suppressed rage. He scrolled through his photos. Apparently he'd taken pictures of every envelope in that stack before we came downstairs. Smart. He stopped on one image and held the screen out to me. "Earlier," he said, voice tight, "when the mail fell, there was a bank statement mixed in. I photographed it." The screen illuminated both our faces in the dim basement. The statement belonged to Corbin's primary household account at Cascade Regional Bank. Vernon zoomed in on the transaction history May through June. I recognized the amounts immediately. May 3rd wire transfer out $900. Recipient Celeste Voss Auto Financing. May 4th deposit in $900. Source Lester Thornton Rent. May 3rd wire transfer out $900. Recipient Celeste Voss Auto Financing. May 4th deposit in $900. Source Lester Thornton Rent. June 7th. Wire transfer out $900. Recipient Celeste Voss Auto Financing. June 8th. Deposit in $900. Source Lester Thornton Rent. July 5th. Wire transfer out $1,200. Recipient Celeste Voss Auto Financing. July 6th. Deposit in $1,200. Source Lester Thornton Rent. Every month, exactly 24 hours after I paid rent to my son, that exact amount wire transferred to Celeste Voss's auto financing account. The account number matched a 2023 Cadillac Escalade. I could see the partial VIN in the memo line. I'd been bankrolling my son's mother-in-law's luxury vehicle for 3 months, $900 at a time. "Every goddamn month," Vernon breathed. "Your rent going straight to her Cadillac. Jesus Christ, Lester." I stared at the screen, at the numbers lined up so precisely, at the mechanical efficiency of it. They'd turned me into a monthly payment. Not even for themselves, for her. For Celeste's fake pearls and loud voice and clicking jewelry. Vernon slammed his fist on the metal cot frame. The sound rang through the basement like a bell. Upstairs, footsteps creaked, someone moving in the kitchen, then went silent again. "I'll kill him," Vernon whispered. "I swear to God, I'll—" "You need to understand," I said, pulling the notebook from my pocket. "A watchmaker doesn't rush repairs. You map every gear first. You catalog every misalignment. Then you act." I opened the notebook to a fresh page and began writing. Date, time, transaction pattern, account numbers, wire transfer schedule. The mechanical precision of their exploitation documented in blue ink under a basement lamp. My handwriting didn't shake. My hands knew their work. When I finished, I folded the phone image Vernon had shown me, tucked it into the notebook's inside pocket, and looked up at him with eyes clear as polished watch glass. "Tomorrow morning," I said, I'm going to tell Corbin I want to pay $1,200 a month instead. Vernon stared at me, his mouth opened, closed, opened again. What? $1,200, I repeated. I'll tell him I want to contribute more. Family rates are too generous, I'll say. Portland's expensive. I closed the notebook, smiled at Vernon, the kind of smile that has nothing to do with being happy. Tomorrow, I said, I'm going to tell Corbin I want to pay more. Vernon stared at me like I'd lost my mind. I let him stare. What he didn't understand yet was that the best traps are the ones your enemy builds for himself. You just need to make him think he's winning. Vernon left that night still shaking his head, still not understanding why I'd hand them more money. The trap was already forming, he just couldn't see the shape yet. The next morning I woke at 5 in the basement dark, just as I had every morning for 38 years, the mechanic's habit of catching the best light before the sun fully clears the horizon. My cot creaked when I sat up. The mildew smell never left no matter how long I ran the dehumidifier. I dressed in the dim glow of the desk lamp and climbed the narrow stairs to the kitchen, made instant coffee in the microwave because the espresso machine was off limits, and carried the mug out to the backyard. The grass was still wet with dew. Morning light filtered through the oak trees along the fence line, turning everything amber and gray. I sat on the weathered bench by the flower bed Margaret would have tended if she were here, if we were still in our house, if the world hadn't tilted sideways the day the hospice nurse said there was nothing more they could do. Footsteps approached along the white wooden fence to the west. I recognized the rhythm, steady, purposeful, someone who'd walked this path before. A hand appeared through the gap where 2 boards had rotted away, holding a glass jar wrapped in a kitchen towel. Steam rose from the lid. Iris Redmond, 55, with short silver hair and 27 years of courtroom experience behind her steady eyes, handed a jar of chicken soup through the gap in the fence separating our properties. "Third time this week," I said, taking the jar. The glass was warm against my palms. "You look like you need it," she replied. Her voice carried the directness of someone who'd spent decades watching people lie under oath. "Chicken, carrot, celery. Real stock, not the box kind." I unscrewed the lid. The smell hit me rich, savory, the kind of thing Margaret used to make on Sundays when Corbin was still small enough to sit on the kitchen counter swinging his legs. My throat tightened. "Why don't you use the front door, Mrs. Redmond?" She paused, her hand still resting on the fence board. "Because the front door isn't yours to answer." The words hung in this morning air. She said it matter-of-factly, without pity, the way you'd state that water runs downhill or clocks tick forward. A simple observation of power in its absence. "My late husband was a judge," she continued. "Multnomah County. I was a court clerk for 27 years. I know what exploitation looks like." I took a sip of the soup. It burned going down, but I didn't stop. When I looked up, she was watching me with the same expression I'd seen Vernon wear the night before, fury mixed with helplessness, the look of someone who sees an injustice but doesn't know how to fix it. "Thank you for the soup," I said. She nodded once, sharp and efficient, then turned back toward her house. I pulled the leather notebook from my jacket pocket and logged the entry while the ink was still fresh in my mind. Redmond. Court clerk, retired, widowed, fence west side, 3rd soup delivery. She walked back through the gap in the fence. I hadn't smiled in 3 months. I didn't smile then either, but something in my chest loosened by exactly 1 notch. 3 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, when Solene was upstairs recording unboxing videos and Corbin was locked in his office on a conference call, Vernon arrived at the front door carrying a claw hammer. "Came to return this," he announced loud enough for anyone listening. "Borrowed it last month." I let him in. We didn't speak. Vernon walked straight to the dining room where Solene's laptop sat open on the oak table, screen still lit because she never bothered to lock it. I knew her password. She'd asked me to unlock it 2 weeks ago when she forgot it herself. 4 digits. 2018, the year she married Corbin. Vernon's fingers moved fast. He plugged in a small USB drive, navigated to the file he'd prepared at his office the night before, and clicked print. The document already existed. He'd drafted it with Harrington 3 days ago. He just needed her printer. 3 pages emerged warm from the tray. Vernon scanned them once, nodded to himself, then opened the printer tray and tucked them beneath the blank paper stack where Celine would find them next time she needed to print something. 8 minutes after he'd arrived, Vernon was gone. The hammer sat on the kitchen counter. The laptop screen had gone dark. Upstairs, Soline's voice narrated something about luxury skincare to her phone camera. That evening, I stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes from dinner I hadn't been invited to eat. Corbin passed behind me, heading to the living room with a glass of wine. I dried my hands on the dish towel and turned. "I've been thinking," I said. "Inflation is rough these days. Starting next month, I'll contribute $1,200 instead of $900. Corbin stopped mid-stride, turned slowly. His eyes went to Celine, who'd appeared in the doorway, and something passed between them, a look I recognized from when he was 12 and found a $20 bill on the sidewalk. That flash of unexpected fortune. "That's very responsible of you, Dad," Corbin said, his voice going smooth. "See, this is what maturity looks like." Celine crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "He's finally getting it," she murmured to Corbin, just loud enough for me to hear. I nodded and turned back to the sink, scrubbing at a plate that was already clean. Behind me, I heard them move into the living room, heard the clink of wine glasses, heard Soline's laugh, high and bright and convinced she'd won. Corbin thought he'd won another round. He didn't know Vernon had already changed the rules of the game, and neither did Celine. Yet. My phone buzzed in my pocket an hour later. "Thanks for being reasonable, Dad. We appreciate it." I typed back, "Of course, son." I meant every word, and I was already thinking about the signature Celine would add to that contract, the one she didn't know Vernon had rewritten, the one waiting in her printer tray with clause 14B buried on page 3, the one that would trigger treble damages under Oregon elder abuse statutes the moment she signed her name and handed it to me. 2 weeks later, she'd walk down to the basement with that document in her hand, demanding I sign without asking questions. I'd read every word, especially page 3. 2 weeks passed in synthetic quiet. Corbin sent 3 more texts thanking me for being reasonable. Soline's live streams continued upstairs, her voice drifting through the heating vents as she unboxed luxury items I was now helping finance. I logged every word in my notebook. Vernon called twice, once to confirm the printer swap, once to tell me patience was the hardest part of any plan. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, I heard the click of manicured fingernails tapping against the basement door. I was at my workbench when she descended without knocking, the stairs creaking under her weight. I'd been servicing a 1947 Longines pocket watch, the kind of repair that required absolute stillness, tweezers holding a gear smaller than a grain of rice. The green felt pad beneath the disassembled movement held 37 separate components arranged in the exact order I'd removed them. Watchmakers develop systems. You can't rebuild what you can't remember. Celine stopped 3 feet from my bench, holding a document folded in half. Her nails were painted coral today, matching her blouse. The click, click, click of her phone case tapping against her thigh told me she was impatient, that this interruption was pulling her away from something more important. "Sign this," she said, shoving the paper forward without preamble. "Old man, don't ask questions." I set the tweezers down with the care the mechanism demanded, wiped my hands on the cloth draped over my knee, and looked up at her. She was 28 years old and believed herself invincible in the way people do when they've never lost anything that mattered. "Without us, you'd be dead in a ditch," she continued, her voice carrying that particular edge of contempt reserved for people she considered burdens. "Least you can do is sign a simple receipt when we ask." I took the document, 3 pages stapled in the upper left corner. The header read "Monthly Tenancy Acknowledgement and Receipt." Below that, a paragraph explaining that this document served as official confirmation of rental payment and occupancy terms suitable for tax documentation purposes. Standard boilerplate language, the kind of thing landlords use to establish paper trails. I flip to the second page. More standard terms: occupancy dates, rent amount, property address. My name appeared 4 times, each instance spelled correctly. Walter Lester Thornton. The formality of the full legal name should have been my first clue, but Soline's arrogance had already scripted this scene in her mind. She expected compliance. She expected me to sign without reading. So I did. "Where would you like me to sign?" I asked. She pointed to the signature line at the bottom of page 3 with one coral nail. "There. Date it today." I pulled a pen from my shirt pocket, the same pocket that held my loop, the same pocket that had held watchmaker's tools for 38 years, and signed my full name in the steady cursive Margaret had always admired. No tremor, no hesitation. I dated it July 2nd, 2024, and slid the document back across the workbench. Soline snatched it up, glanced at my signature to confirm I'd actually signed, then smiled. It was the smile of someone who believes they've won a small victory, extracted compliance from a subordinate, reinforced a hierarchy. "See," she said, turning on her heel, "that wasn't so hard. You're finally learning your place." She walked upstairs with a document she believed was a receipt. I went back to the pocket watch. It needed a new mainspring. Some things once broken need to be rebuilt from the inside out. What Soline didn't comprehend, what she had no framework to comprehend, was that the document in her manicured hand was not the standard receipt she'd printed 2 weeks ago. It was Vernon's version, the one he'd seated in her printer tray while she recorded videos upstairs, the one that looked identical on pages 1 through 3 front, but differed drastically on the reverse of page 3. Clause 14b, printed in 8-point font on that reverse side, stipulated the following: "Any party to this agreement who utilizes the tenant's personal identification details, financial credentials, or legal identity for the purpose of securing credit, financing, or monetary instruments, without the tenant's explicit written authorization, shall be deemed to have committed material breach of contract. Such breach shall trigger full asset liability under Oregon Revised Statute 124.110, financial exploitation of a vulnerable person, with remedies including but not limited to treble damages, property liens, and mandatory attorney fee reimbursement." Harrington had structured the clause to satisfy Oregon's plain language disclosure requirements. Small print, yes, but legally unambiguous and placed within the 4 corners of a document she'd voluntarily signed. Courts would have no grounds to void it. Any party to this agreement who utilizes the tenant's personal identification details, financial credentials, or legal identity for the purpose of securing credit, financing, or monetary instruments without the tenant's explicit written authorization shall be deemed to have committed material breach of contract. Such breach shall trigger full asset liability under Oregon Revised Statute 124.110, financial exploitation of a vulnerable person, with remedies including but not limited to treble damages, property liens, and mandatory attorney fee reimbursement. Vernon had already filed the original signed copy with his law office 3 days after he'd printed it. The document existed in legal record. Soline had just added her signature to a contract that transformed every unauthorized use of my name, every forged document, every hidden piece of mail into a calculable liability with triple damages. The beauty of it was how invisible it remained. She thought she'd extracted submission. I'd given her exactly what she wanted: my signature, my compliance, my apparent defeat. And in doing so, I'd handed her the rope. Later, I would explain this to Iris, but that afternoon, I just watched her walk away holding something she didn't understand. I picked up my loop and returned to the watch mechanism spread across the green felt pad. The mainspring had developed a stress fracture after 38 years of constant tension, a microscopic crack invisible to the naked eye but fatal to the mechanism's integrity. I'd need to replace it entirely. Source a new spring from a specialty supplier, rebuild the entire movement from its foundation. Some repairs require patience. Some require the broken thing to believe it's still working right up until the moment it stops. This particular repair required Soline to remain ignorant for exactly 3 more weeks. 3 weeks until she'd use that signed document in a way that would activate every clause Vernon had embedded in the fine print. 3 weeks until the credit union letters, the intercepted mail, the wire transfers to Celeste's Cadillac account would all transform from scattered evidence into a legally actionable pattern of exploitation documented by her own signature. I returned the loop to my pocket and picked up the damaged mainspring with my tweezers, holding it up to the light. The fracture ran lengthwise, a hairline crack that would have been impossible to see without magnification. I set it aside in the discard pile and reached for the replacement spring I'd ordered 3 days ago. Upstairs, Soline's voice drifted through the vents, bright and oblivious, narrating her afternoon to 180,000 strangers who had no idea they were watching someone sign away her future 3 pages at a time. 3 weeks stretched ahead like a wound mainspring waiting to release. I rebuilt the Longines mechanism 1 component at a time, logging each hour in my notebook, waiting for Soline to do exactly what people like her always do, use power the moment they believe it's absolute. That evening, Corbin came to the top of the basement stairs with the look of a man who had just performed an act of immense charity. He didn't descend. He never did. Instead, he stood in the doorway with the light from the kitchen behind him, turning him into a silhouette framed against brightness I wasn't allowed to occupy. His voice carried down into the basement dark where I sat at my workbench, the Longines spread across the green felt. "Dad, I found a buyer for your old shop," he announced. His tone held the careful patience of someone explaining complex matters to a child. "Got you $20,000 for the lease transfer. Money's going into our joint household fund, for expenses." The screwdriver in my hand didn't move. I'd been tightening a case screw, and I let it rest there at the exact angle of tension required my fingers steady. 20,000. For a business I'd built over 38 years, a storefront Margaret and I had opened the year after we married, a place that still had my name in gold leaf on the window glass. Corbin waited. I could feel him waiting, suspended in that doorway, expecting something. Outrage, perhaps. Protest. Grief. The things normal fathers would express when their sons sold their life's work out from under them, while they ate cold leftovers in basements. I turned slowly on my stool and looked up at his silhouette. "Thank you, Corbin," I said. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then he shifted his weight, and I heard the smile in his voice before he spoke. "See," he said, "this is what family does. We take care of things. You don't need to worry about that shop anymore, Dad. We've got it handled." He left. The door at the top of the stairs clicked shut. I turned back to the watch mechanism and resumed tightening the screw 3 complete rotations, checking the tension with my fingertips. What Corbin remained blind to, what his greed wouldn't let him see, was that the entity acquiring the lease transfer was Pacific Timepiece Holdings, LLC, a Delaware corporation registered to do business in Oregon and managed by Vernon's law office. The $80,000 from Margaret's trust had finalized the buyout 3 days ago. The physical shop, the lease, the fixtures, the decades of goodwill, all of it remained entirely mine. Corbin had simply taken $20,000 for selling me my own property. Corbin sent me a text that night. "Don't worry, Dad, we got good money for your shop." I replied, "Thank you, son." I meant every word, and I was already thinking about what to name it when I hung the sign back up. That weekend I sat in the backyard at dusk when Iris appeared at the fence gap. This time she held 2 glasses of iced tea instead of soup. I understood the shift immediately. Soup was for comfort. Iced tea signaled serious conversation. She handed 1 glass through and kept the other standing on her side of the fence. The ice clinked against the glass. Condensation ran down the sides, cool against my palm. "How long are you planning to document before you act?" she asked. I took a sip. Sweet tea, the kind Margaret used to make with fresh mint from the garden we no longer owned. My throat tightened. "I don't know what you mean," I said. Iris made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. "Lester, I was a court clerk for 27 years. I know what a man looks like when he's building a case." I set the glass down on the bench beside me, opened my notebook, stared at the entries that filled every page, dates, times, dollar amounts, exact quotes, the meticulous record of systematic exploitation that had started the day Margaret died and continued every single day since. "The mail," I said finally. "They've been intercepting it, hiding envelopes addressed to me. There was money. Margaret left me money. They made sure I never saw it." Iris nodded once, didn't interrupt. "The rent I pay goes straight to Celeste's car financing every month. $900 I thought was helping my son, and it was buying his mother-in-law a Cadillac." Iris took a sip of her tea, waited. "They sold my shop today. Corbin did. Told me he got $20,000 for it, and the money's going into their household account, for expenses." The words came out flat, clinical, the way I'd write them in the notebook, facts without emotion, observations without commentary. When I finished, Iris stood silent for a long moment, the evening light turning everything amber and gold. Then she set her glass down on her side of the fence. "Give me 3 days," she said. Her voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who'd spent decades watching justice move through bureaucratic channels. "I know someone at Oregon Department of Human Services Adult Protective Services, and I know a lawyer who specializes in ORS 124. Iris, I know you don't need saving Lester." She cut me off with the gentle firmness of someone who understood exactly what I was doing and why. But every good watchmaker needs the right tools. I watched her walk back through the gap in the fence. Margaret used to say the right person shows up exactly when you've stopped looking. I thought she was talking about watches. Maybe she was talking about this. She walked through the fence gap, disappearing into the amber light of her own kitchen. I stood there holding the empty iced tea glass, the condensation leaving wet circles on my palms. The mint leaves had settled at the bottom. Margaret had been gone 3 months. 3 months of plastic chairs and cold leftovers and basement isolation. 3 months of documenting every theft, every humiliation, every systematic cruelty in blue ink across brown leather pages. And for the first time since she died, I felt like I wasn't rebuilding alone. The fence boards held the last of the evening light. Beyond them, Iris's kitchen window glowed warm. I could see her silhouette moving inside, already making phone calls, already setting machinery in motion. In 3 days, she'd return with a business card and a Wednesday morning appointment, and the legal machinery would begin to align with the trap Vernon and I had already built. What Corbin and Solene couldn't see yet was that they weren't just facing an old man in a basement. They were facing a coalition. 3 days later, Iris returned through the fence gap at dusk, holding a business card and a yellow legal pad filled with names and phone numbers. The coalition was no longer theoretical. It had addresses and office hours and a Wednesday morning appointment I would keep. July arrived with dry heat that made Portland shimmer, and on the first morning of the month, I left something in my nightstand drawer that I had never left anywhere carelessly in 60 years. My Social Security card. I placed it inside a white envelope marked "Important" in blue ink across the front. Not subtle, not hidden. I set it in the top drawer of the pressed wood nightstand beside my basement cot, the drawer that didn't lock, the drawer anyone could open with a single pull. Then I went upstairs to make coffee and returned to find everything exactly as I'd left it. Watchmakers understand bait. You don't catch a faulty gear by chasing it. You create conditions where the fault reveals itself under normal operation. You apply the right pressure at the right point and wait for the mechanism to demonstrate exactly where it's broken. I left the envelope there for 3 days. On the morning of July 4th, I told Corbin I needed to run errands, pick up medication from the pharmacy, stop at the hardware store for light bulbs. He barely looked up from his laptop. Solene was upstairs recording something about skincare routines. I walked out the front door at 9:30 and didn't come back until noon. When I descended the basement stairs, the nightstand drawer was open by exactly 2 inches. Not wide, not ransacked, just open enough to show someone had pulled it, searched inside, and pushed it mostly closed again in a hurry. The white envelope sat where I'd left it, but the Social Security card inside was no longer aligned the way I'd placed it perpendicular to the envelope's edge. Someone had removed it, examined it, returned it at a slightly different angle. I didn't know exactly what time she'd come down, but when I returned, the drawer was open 2 inches. That was all the confirmation I needed. I sat at my workbench and picked up the 1962 Omega Seamaster I'd set aside 3 days ago when I'd placed the envelope in the drawer. The movement needed a complete cleaning. Years of accumulated oil had gummed up the escapement wheel. I opened my tool case, selected a brush with bristles finer than human hair, and began the methodical work of removing debris that had been building for decades. At 2 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Vernon's text came through in 2 parts. The first, got a call from the office. Someone inquired about a personal loan using your SSN. We're processing. Cameras running. The second, 15 seconds later, $50,000 personal line of credit. Application submitted this morning. Signature looks nothing like yours. I stared at the screen, read both messages twice. Vernon's financial services company, the one he'd operated for 23 years, the one with security cameras in every office and lobby, the one that required identification, verification for every transaction, had just received a loan application filed under my social security number by someone who wasn't me. Solene thought she'd found a key. She'd actually just walked into the lock. I set the watch down on the bench. The mainspring was finally holding. Some repairs take patience. Most of them do. I typed a single word, good. Then I set the phone face down and returned to the Omega. The balance wheel needed adjustment. 38 years of wear had thrown the timing off by 3 seconds per day. Not much. But in watchmaking, 3 seconds is the difference between precision and failure. The heat made the basement air thick and still. Upstairs, I could hear Solene's voice narrating something about summer skincare to her phone camera. The air conditioning ran constantly now, but it never reached the basement. I'd stopped mentioning it after the first week. Some discomforts you document, others you just endure. Vernon called 20 minutes later. Security footage is clean, he said without preamble. Woman matching Solene's description came in at 10:45, used your social security number, forged signature on the application, claimed she was acting as your financial power of attorney due to cognitive decline. Did you approve it? I asked. Preliminary approval, yeah. Told her final documents would be ready in 7 to 10 business days. She seemed pleased. Vernon paused. Jesus, Lester. She walked right into it. She walked into what she wanted to see. You knew she'd do this. I knew someone would, I said. Solene or Celeste. Didn't matter which. They've been intercepting my mail for months. It was only a matter of time before they tried something bigger. Vernon was quiet for a moment. Then, the footage is admissible. Civil fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse. Combined with the lease contract she signed, we're building treble damages before she even knows we're counting. How long until the loan documents are ready? 8 days. She'll come back to sign. We'll have more footage then. I thanked him and ended the call. Picked up the loop from the bench and examined the balance wheel under magnification. The jewel bearings were finally clean. the wheel rotating without friction, the mechanism keeping time the way it was designed to 38 years ago when someone first wound it and set it to the correct hour. You need to understand something about setting traps. The bait has to look accidental, has to feel like opportunity, not invitation, has to make your enemy believe they're the clever one. I'd left my Social Security card in an unlocked drawer in a basement where I'd been systematically humiliated for 3 months. To Solene, it looked like the carelessness of an old man losing track of important documents. To me, it was the most deliberate thing I'd done since Margaret died. I set the phone face down and picked up the Omega. The balance wheel was finally rotating smoothly, 38 years of accumulated grit cleaned away in one careful afternoon. Some mechanisms just need the right pressure applied at exactly the right point. Solene had just applied hers. Later that afternoon, light footsteps would clatter down the basement stairs. My grandson with his locked iPad about to accidentally hand me the keys to every secret his parents thought they'd hidden. But for now, I just sat at my workbench in the July heat watching a 60-year-old watch tick forward with the precision it was always meant to have. The Omega's balance wheel kept perfect time. I set it aside and heard footsteps on the stairs light quick. The only person in this house who comes down here without knocking because he doesn't know it's something he's supposed to do. Silas appeared at the bottom step clutching his iPad in both hands, the screen dark. He was 4 years old with untied shoelaces and a juice stain on his shirt, and when he saw me at the workbench, his face lit up with the kind of uncomplicated relief that comes from knowing someone will help without conditions. "Grandpa, it's locked again," he said, holding the device out toward me. "Mom said I can only watch if Grandpa unlocks it." I slipped off my loop and looked at my grandson, the single soul in this building who looked at me without an underlying ledger, without calculation, without measuring what I was worth or how much longer I'd be useful. Just a child who needed his screen unlocked so he could watch cartoons. "Come here, buddy," I said. He climbed onto the stool beside me, setting the iPad on the workbench next to the Omega. I knew the passcode. Solene had asked me to unlock it 3 weeks ago when she'd forgotten it herself. 4 digits, 2018, the year she married Corbin. The same password she used for everything. I entered the code. The screen unlocked and Silas immediately started tapping toward his cartoons app. But in the second before he did, I caught sight of something in the upper right corner, the iCloud family sharing panel left open from whatever Solene had been doing earlier. 6 weeks ago, Corbin had added me to their family account. He'd explained it as a convenience easy syncing, he'd said. Shared photos, emergency contacts. I'd nodded and let him enter my information into his phone, let him tether my identity to their network without protest. I pulled my leather notebook from my pocket and wrote a single line, iCloud, shared account, messages visible if synced, check desktop. Silas settled onto my cot with the iPad instantly absorbed in something animated and bright. Within 5 minutes, his eyes were drooping. Within 10, he was asleep, still holding the device against his chest, his breathing slow and even in the basement dimness. He fell asleep on my cot, holding the iPad, his breathing slow and even in the basement dimness. Solene's laptop sat open on the desk screen, still lit. She never locked it. She'd asked me to unlock it 2 weeks ago when she forgot her own password, and since then she'd stopped bothering. I sat down in her chair. The Messages app was still open in the dock. I clicked it. The screen filled with her conversation threads, photos, calendar invites, and at the top of the list a thread between Solene and Celeste time-stamped from this morning. She'd been logged in, synced, and wide open the entire time she was upstairs recording videos. I was in her house at her desk using a computer she'd never bothered to lock. Everything I was about to see, I was legally present to see. I read it twice before I started transcribing. Solene. The account is $150,000. We need him gone before he turns it on. Corbin can file for emergency guardianship. Rosewood Care Home in Bend, $3,200 per month memory care wing. They don't ask too many questions. Celeste. How soon? Solene. Give it 30 days after Europe. By then the guardianship hearing should be scheduled. Once it's filed, he can't access the money. Court assigns Corbin as conservator. Everything transfers. Celeste. What about the brother? Solene. Vernon. He's not on any documents. He can complain all he wants. Once the guardianship order goes through, he'll have zero legal standing. I stared at the screen, read every word again, pulled up my notebook and transcribed with the same mechanical precision I used to log every humiliation, every theft, every cruelty over the past 3 months. Rosewood, Bend, $3,200 per month, 30 days after Europe. Guardianship hearing, Corbin filing. Memory care wing. Court conservatorship equals asset transfer. Vernon excluded. They knew about the money. They'd known for weeks, maybe longer. And they'd built an entire legal strategy to take it before I could access it. Emergency guardianship based on cognitive decline. A nursing home in Bend willing to accept questionable placements. A timeline calibrated down to the week. 30 days after Europe. I pulled up Corbin's calendar, also synced to the family account. There it was, Paris Division Conference, scheduled for July 15th to 22nd. 7 days in France. Return July 23rd. 30 days after that would be late August. They'd wait until after the trip, after they'd secured the fraudulent loan, after they'd established enough documented evidence of my decline. Then Corbin would file. The hearing would be scheduled, and I'd be moved to Rosewood Care Home's memory care wing before I ever knew what hit me. They had a timeline, I had a notebook, and now I had their words. I forwarded the screenshot directly to Vernon's email, then to the address Iris had given me 3 days ago, closed the laptop, sat in the basement darkness with my grandson asleep 3 feet away, his small chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of someone who didn't know yet what his parents were capable of. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while thinking about what Margaret would say. She would probably say 29 days is enough. Upstairs, Solene's voice called down, "Silas, dinner." He stirred, rubbed his eyes, grabbed the iPad and ran back up the stairs without a word. The basement door closed behind him. I sat alone in the dim glow of my desk lamp, staring at the notebook entry. Rosewood, Bend. 30 days after Europe. The guardianship hearing would be scheduled. The room would be waiting. They'd measured everything down to the week, the Europe trip for cover, the 30-day window for execution, the memory care wing where questions wouldn't be asked. They had a timeline calibrated down to the week. I had their messages, their account numbers, and 29 days to dismantle everything they'd built. But first I needed a lawyer who specialized in exactly this kind of systematic cruelty, and Iris had promised she knew one. I picked up the Omega from the workbench. The balance wheel ticked forward with absolute precision, keeping time the way it was designed to 60 years ago. Some mechanisms just needed to be cleaned, calibrated, and trusted to do exactly what they were built for. I had 29 days. That would be enough. 29 days. I spent the next 3 waking at 4 instead of 5, cataloging every piece of evidence with the precision Margaret used to say was both my greatest strength and my most exhausting quality. She'd been right about both. 3 days later, Iris knocked at the basement door from the private side alley. The path Corbin didn't realize I still used to leave early every morning. She wore a navy trench coat despite the July heat and held a business card between 2 fingers. "Wednesday at 10, she said. "Downtown. I'm driving." I grabbed my leather notebook and the folder Vernon had prepared 3 months of documentation organized into sections with labeled tabs. Iris didn't ask to see it. She just led me up the alley to her car parked 2 blocks away, where Corbin would never notice it missing from my usual spot. The drive downtown took 20 minutes. Iris didn't fill the silence with reassurances or questions. She just drove, and I watched Portland slide past the window, the bridges, the river, the buildings I'd known for 60 years but rarely entered anymore. Harrington and Associates occupied the 12th floor of a steel and glass tower overlooking the Willamette River. The elevator opened onto carpet so thick it absorbed sound. A receptionist led us to a compact conference room with windows that stretched floor to ceiling, the river below moving slow and gray in the morning light. Douglas Harrington, the elder law attorney in his mid-50s with silver-rimmed glasses and 20 years of ORS 124 cases behind him, looked up from my documentation with the expression of someone genuinely impressed. I'd arrived early and spread everything across the conference table before he entered the leather notebook, opened to the first entry from Father's Day. The recovered envelopes Vernon and I had pulled from behind the mail organizer, printed cash routing statements showing exact dollar amounts flowing to Celeste Voss's auto financing account, the conversation records from Soline's laptop about Rosewood Care Home, and the guardianship timeline and the lease receipt bearing Soline's signature over Clause 14B that Vernon had embedded 3 weeks ago. Harrington picked up the notebook first, read 3 pages without speaking, set it down, examined the routing statements, studied the conversation records, finally looked up at me with something close to respect. "Mr. Thornton, you've done half my job for me." He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and began writing. 3-stage counteroffensive. First, we file an official report with Oregon Department of Human Services Adult Protective Services. That creates the state record. Second, we finalize the civil suit under ORS 124.110. That's the Oregon statute for financial exploitation of vulnerable persons. Triggers treble damages plus mandatory attorney fee recovery. Third, he paused, looked at the lease receipt again. This Clause 14B is enforceable. "Soline signed it," I said, 3 weeks ago. She believed it was a standard rent receipt for tax purposes. Harrington's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "The clause stipulates that unauthorized use of tenant identification for financial gain constitutes material breach with full asset liability. Combined with the routing statements showing systematic diversion of rent payments, we have documented pattern exploitation. The lease itself becomes evidence." "And the guardianship filing they're planning?" I asked. "We preempt it. Draft a civil lien notice to be recorded with Multnomah County Recorder's Office exactly 3 days before." He glanced at his notes. "Before what exactly?" "Corbin's promotion party," I said. "Late August. They'll be celebrating. The lien goes into effect before they know it exists." Iris sat silently beside me the entire meeting. When Harrington said half my job, she offered a small, steady nod. She'd known. She'd seen it that first morning at the fence. Harrington continued writing. "The civil lien operates independently once recorded with the county. No preliminary hearing needed. It goes into effect the moment it's stamped. Property encumbrance, asset freeze. They can't sell, refinance, or transfer without satisfying the claim first." "How long does recording take?" I asked. "Expedited filing active within the business week. We file Tuesday. It's stamped and recorded before the weekend. You said the party is Saturday. Last Saturday of August." "Perfect." He made another note. "We also need to address the guardianship threat directly. They're claiming cognitive decline memory issues. We'll need a competency evaluation neutral third party, preferably someone who specializes in elder law cases. Oregon requires clear and convincing evidence for guardianship. One evaluation showing you're of sound mind demolishes their entire strategy."
"When?"
"Next week. I'll arrange it." He flipped to a new page on the legal pad. "One more thing. The lease Soline signed Clause 14B aside grants you full tenant protections under ORS 90.427. Corbin is legally barred from eviction or displacement without 30 days formal written notice. Even if they try to force you out before the lien activates, they'd be in violation of state landlord-tenant law. I'd been living in that basement for 3 months, believing I had no rights, no protections, no legal standing. The document Solene had signed, thinking it was a receipt, had accidentally granted me everything the law offered. Harrington closed this folder and leaned back. The timeline is tight but workable. DHS report filed by Friday. Competency evaluation next week. Civil lien recorded Tuesday, August 27th. Active Friday the 30th. Party Saturday the 31st. And if they discover what we're doing before then, the lawyer slid a yellow legal pad across the desk. Anticipate what they'll do when cornered. I picked up the pen. I had been anticipating that since the night Vernon found the envelopes. I just hadn't written it down yet. Until now. I wrote Corbin panic, deflect blame Vernon, Solene aggression, documentation, destruction attempt, Celeste flee or lawyer up. Harrington read my notes upside down and nodded. Document every interaction from this point forward, every conversation, every threat, every attempt at intimidation. It all becomes evidence. He walked us to the elevator, shook my hand with the firm grip of someone who'd done this before. They'll panic when they realize what's happening, he said. Panic makes people sloppy. The elevator doors closed. Iris looked at me in the mirrored steel. Are you ready for that? I thought about Silas asleep on my cot, still innocent enough to believe families protected each other. About Margaret's account, the one she'd set up 5 years ago, knowing I might need an escape she couldn't give me herself. About the shop that still carried my name, even though my son thought he'd sold it. I was ready. But first I needed to make sure they had no idea what was coming. Iris dropped me at the side alley entrance. I walked back slowly, carrying Harrington's folder with his notes clipped to the front. The legal machinery was aligned. Now I just needed to keep them from realizing it. That evening, Iris called again, and this time her voice didn't have its usual stillness. Solene came by this afternoon, she said. I was at my workbench with the Omega disassembled. I set down my tweezers. What did she want? She knocked around too, wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Said she wanted to check in on me. My husband died 3 years ago, Lester. She's never asked about him once. I waited. She asked if you'd mentioned anything about your finances. Said the family was worried you might make unwise decisions at your age. Asked if you'd seemed confused lately, forgetful, whether you'd talked about having trouble managing money. What did you tell her? I invited her in for tea. Spent 20 minutes listening to her alternate between fake concern and fishing for information. She asked point blank whether you'd mentioned having any other bank accounts, whether you'd talked about legal matters, whether anyone had been visiting you. And I told her you're a very quiet man who likes to fix old watches, that we sometimes talk through the fence about the weather and my tomatoes, that you seem perfectly capable of managing your own affairs. She paused. Then I walked her to the door, locked it, and called you. She wanted to know how much you'd told me, Iris said. Good, I said. Then she doesn't know how much I haven't told her yet. A pause. Lester, be careful. I looked at the logbook on my workbench. 41 pages of careful. I said. After we hung up, I added July 12th, 7:45 p.m. Solene probed Iris, fishing for bank accounts, legal activity, outside contacts. Iris deflected successfully, family growing nervous. 2 days later, at 11 o'clock at night, I heard the distinct click of high heels on driveway gravel. I'd been reading at my desk when the sound came through the narrow window, well-sharp, expensive shoes on loose stone. I switched off the lamp and moved to the basement door. The door sat at an angle aligned with the corridor from garage to main house. Cracked exactly 2 inches standing to the left, I could see a sliver of hallway and hear everything. I'd discovered this geometry my second week. I'd been using it ever since. Celeste's voice came first, louder than it should be. I'm back. The room at the Bellagio was acceptable. Then Corbin, harsh and low, keep your voice down, he's downstairs. The old man's deaf and half blind, he can't hear anything. Through the crack, I watched them pass under the hallway light. Celeste wore a cream pantsuit and carried a Hermes bag I'd never seen before, fresh from Las Vegas. Corbin grabbed her arm, pulled her closer. His whisper was barely audible. The $50,000 loan should clear next week. Your bookies can wait one more week. And the old man? Celeste asked. Corbin glanced toward the basement door. I held perfectly still. He couldn't see me in the darkness. 30 days after Europe, Corbin said. The guardianship hearing's been scheduled. Rosewood confirmed the room. $3,200 a month memory care wing. By September 1st, he'll be in Bend and we'll have conservatorship of everything. Celeste adjusted the bag on her shoulder. And the money in the account Margaret left transfers to the conservatorship estate the moment the order is signed. He'll never touch it. They moved down the hallway. I heard the refrigerator open, wine glasses clinking, Soline's voice joining them. I closed the door and returned to my desk. 30 days after Europe. I did the math. I needed fewer than that. I went back to the workbench and picked up where I left off. The movement needed 2 more adjustments before it would run true. So did I. I opened the logbook and wrote, July 14th, 11 p.m. Celeste returned from Vegas. Hermes bag new. Corbin $50,000 loan clears next week paying Celeste's bookies. Guardianship hearing scheduled. Rosewood room confirmed. 30 days after Europe trip. Conservatorship equals asset transfer. He'll never touch it. I underscored the last 2 lines twice. They didn't just plan to take the money. They planned to lock me away where I couldn't fight back, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but sit in a memory care wing I didn't need while they dismantled everything Margaret had tried to protect. I closed the notebook and sat at the workbench staring at those underscored lines. Guardianship hearing scheduled. They had lawyers. They had paperwork. They had a room with my name already on a chart somewhere in Bend, a bed made with institutional sheets, a window I'd stare through while they spent Margaret's money and told Silas I was too sick to see him. But they didn't know I had Douglas Harrington. They didn't know I had the iCloud messages documenting everything they'd said in texts they thought were private. They didn't know the $50,000 loan they were celebrating was filmed on security cameras from 3 separate angles at Vernon's office. And they didn't know that in exactly 43 days when they gathered for Corbin's promotion party, every piece of evidence I'd collected would detonate in a single coordinated strike they wouldn't see coming until it was too late. 43 days. Every gear was in place. All that remained was keeping still long enough for the mechanism to run. 43 days. I spent the next 3 weeks refining the timeline with Harrington cross-referencing every piece of evidence with Vernon and waiting for the pieces to align. The competency evaluation came back clean, no cognitive decline, no memory impairment, no grounds for emergency guardianship. They didn't know it had happened. They wouldn't until it was too late. The following evening, Silas came down the stairs again. This time there was no iPad in his hands. He held a piece of paper folded and creased so many times the crayon was starting to flake off along the seams. He climbed onto the edge of my cot without asking the way children do when they need comfort more than permission, and unfolded the drawing across his lap. It showed an old man with glasses standing beside a little boy in front of a massive house. The house had too many windows and a chimney that bent at an impossible angle. The old man's smile was a straight line. The boy's smile reached the edges of the paper. "Grandpa," Silas said, not looking up from the drawing, "are you going to live with us forever?" I set down the loop I'd been using to examine a hairspring fracture. The question hung in the basement air between us, heavier than anything I'd documented in 3 months. "Not forever, buddy," I said, "but long enough." He traced the crayon line of the house with one small finger. "Mom said you might go to a special house soon." My voice came out flat. "Did she?" "She said it's for people who need help remembering things, that you'd be happier there." He looked up at me with 4-year-old eyes that hadn't learned yet to recognize lies dressed up as kindness. "I don't want you to go." I took the drawing from his hands, folded it carefully along the existing creases, and opened my leather logbook. Placed it right behind the page that read, Rosewood Bend, 30 days. The crayon house and the institutional room would sit together in the record exactly 1 page apart. I'm not going anywhere yet, I said. Silas leaned against my shoulder, his weight so light I barely felt it. Promise. I promise. He stayed there for 10 minutes, maybe 15. Then Soline's voice called down from upstairs dinner bath time, the mechanical routine of a household that ran on schedules I no longer belonged to. Silas grabbed the iPad from where he'd left it on the workbench and ran back up the stairs without looking back. Long enough. I had meant long enough to finish what I started downstairs. But sitting beside him, watching him breathe, I wasn't sure anymore what finishing meant, or what it should cost. 3 nights later, on July 28th, the night before the flight to Paris, Corbin and Soline held a small farewell gathering in the living room. I watched from the basement doorway as colleagues and neighbors drifted through with wine glasses and expensive luggage recommendations. Corbin found me standing by the stairs and offered a superficial pat on my shoulder, the kind of gesture that looks affectionate from across a room, but carries no warmth up close. Dad, while we're gone, Celeste will check in on you, he said, just in case. Just in case of what he didn't specify. Just in case I fell. Just in case I forgot to eat. Just in case I tried to access money that wasn't mine anymore, tried to leave, tried to fight back. Take your pick. Thank you, I said. Soline didn't look up from unboxing a new Louis Vuitton carry-on, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The tissue paper crinkled as she pulled it away. Try not to break anything while we're in Paris, she said. Not to me directly, just into the air between us, the way you'd warn a child not to touch the fine china. Corbin walked down the hallway toward his study. I stayed in the doorway, positioned at the angle where I could see through to the desk. He bent over the inkjet printer. I could hear the mechanical hum, the paper feed clicking through 3, maybe 4 pages. He gathered them without reading, slipped them into his desk drawer on the left side, and turned the small brass key until it clicked. The key went back on his keychain. Silver small distinctive among the car fobs and house keys. I opened my logbook later that night and wrote, desk drawer, left side, locked. Key Corbin's keychain silver small. Contents guardianship filing documents printed July 28th, 11:20 p.m., 3 to 4 pages. Celeste walked past me without a word. I counted her steps the way I count the ticks of a mainspring. 14 steps to the guest room, 22 days left. I went back downstairs and opened the notebook to a fresh page. The taxi would arrive at 5 in the morning. I heard Soline setting alarms upstairs, heard Corbin going through the pre-flight checklist he always used, passport tickets, phone chargers, the mechanical recitation of someone who traveled often enough that airports felt like routine. Paris for 2 weeks. They'd returned July 30th from the Europe trip that had been on Corbin's calendar since March. 22 days from tonight until they came back and set their final plan in motion. 22 days for me to access that desk drawer photograph, every document, and add it to the evidence file that was already 3 inches thick. 22 days to dismantle everything they'd built without Silas losing a father in the process. That was the line I couldn't cross, not because they deserved mercy, but because he deserved better. The crayon drawing in my logbook proved that. The old man and the little boy standing in front of the impossible house with the bent chimney and too many windows. Silas had drawn us together. I couldn't let him watch me tear his family apart, even if that family had spent 3 months trying to erase me from it. The house went quiet after midnight. Soline's voice faded. Corbin's footsteps stopped moving overhead. I sat at my workbench with the logbook open to the fresh page and wrote, Departure 5 a.m. July 29th. Return estimated August 20th. Guardianship filing locked in desk left side. 22 days to finalize. The next morning, their taxi would clear the driveway at 5. I'd hear the engine fade around the corner, hear the silence settle back over the house, and then I'd make a single phone call to Vernon. It was time to finalize the gears. At 5 in the morning on July 29th, the airport taxi pulled into the driveway exactly on schedule. I heard the engine idling from the basement window, heard luggage rolling across gravel, heard Corbin's voice giving the driver instructions. Then silence. The house settled into a stillness it hadn't held in 3 months. I waited 10 minutes. Then I called Vernon. "They're gone," I said. "I'll pick you up in 20. 3 hours later, we sat in Vernon's Salem office with Douglas Harrington. 47 pages of documentation spread across the conference table like a blueprint. 22 days until Corbin and Solene returned from Paris. 22 days to finalize everything they'd already put in motion without knowing I'd been watching every step. Harrington organized the pages into 3 stacks. "We have 3 phases," he said. "Phase 1, the fraudulent loan. We let it proceed. Gallagher Financial has security cameras covering every angle of the signing desk. When they come in to execute the application using your social security number, we document everything. No intervention, just observation." Vernon nodded. "My office manager knows the protocol. Camera feeds save automatically to encrypted backup. Time-stamped admissible." "Phase 2, Harrington continued, tapping the middle stack. "We file the Adult Protective Services report with Oregon DHS. That creates the state record. Then we file the civil suit under ORS 124.110, financial exploitation of a vulnerable person. Finally, we pre-record the civil lien with Multnomah County exactly 3 days before the promotion party. No preliminary hearing required. The moment it's stamped, it's active." "And phase 3, I asked. Harrington looked at me over his silver-rimmed glasses. "We expose everything at the party. Media presentation, documented evidence displayed to witnesses. You control the narrative before they can spin it." The room went quiet. Vernon leaned back in his chair. Harrington pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and wrote something, then turned it so I could read it. "The criminal option under 18 U.S.C. Section 1028A carries a mandatory 2 years consecutive federal prison for aggravated identity theft," he said. "If you want him to stay out of prison for the boy's sake, we don't refer it to federal prosecutors. But understand what you're giving up. With the evidence we have, conviction would be certain." I pulled Silas's crayon drawing from my notebook. The old man and the little boy under the impossible house, the bent chimney, the smile that reached the edges of the paper. I stared at it for a long moment. "Civil only," I said. "Asset consequences, treble damages, property liens, financial destruction, but no criminal referral." I looked up at Harrington. I want him to look at the documents and know the criminal option existed. I want him to understand what mercy looks like when it's deliberate. Vernon shook his head. "You're giving them mercy they don't deserve." "Civil only," I said again. Vernon looked at me like I was being generous to people who didn't deserve it. I looked at the drawing in my notebook, a grandfather and a boy under a big house. "Trust me," I said. "When this is done, they'll wish I'd chosen the other option." Harrington made a note on his legal pad. "Civil track it is. Treble damages under ORS 124.110 will still be devastating. We're talking about property seizure, asset liquidation, mandatory attorney fee reimbursement. They'll lose everything they tried to take from you, and then some." "Good," I said. We finalized the timeline. DHS report filed by end of week. Civil suit paperwork ready by August 15th. Civil lien recorded August 25th, 3 days before the party. Everything synchronized to detonate the moment Corbin stood up to celebrate his promotion. I drove back to Portland with Vernon in silence. He dropped me 3 blocks from the house. I walked the side alley path and descended to the basement through the exterior entrance Corbin had forgotten existed. The days passed in mechanical precision. I documented every interaction with Celeste, logged every time she checked the house, noted every meal she didn't offer me. The logbook grew thicker. On August 7th day, 10 of the Europe trip, my phone buzzed at 2:17 in the afternoon. Vernon's text said one word, now. I called him back. He answered on the first ring. Audio's live, he said. I'm patching you in. The line clicked. I heard office sounds, muffled conversation, a door chime, footsteps on commercial carpet. Then Soline's voice, bright and confident. We're here for the personal loan application. Lester Thornton. I sat at my workbench, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my daughter-in-law use my full legal name to commit federal identity theft while my son vacationed in Paris. The bank employee, I recognized the voice as Vernon's office manager, walked them through the paperwork. Social security number, date of birth, current address, loan amount $50,000, purpose debt consolidation. I heard paper sliding across a desk. I heard a pen clicking open. I heard Soline's voice reciting my social security number from memory, the number she'd seen on the card I'd deliberately left in the nightstand drawer 6 weeks ago. I heard the notary stamp, heavy, final, the sound of documents becoming legally binding. I heard the door chime as they left. It's done, Vernon said, his voice replacing the office audio. File's clean. Harrington has the footage from 3 angles, time-stamped. They walked in at 2:14, walked out at 2:31, 17 minutes to commit federal identity theft. I set the phone face down on my workbench, looked at the open gears of the 1962 Omega Seamaster spread across the green velvet pad. The mainspring I'd been adjusting for 3 days was finally holding tension correctly. Some things resist until they don't. Then they move perfectly. An hour later, Vernon sent a screenshot. Soline had posted a selfie on Instagram, smiling in the passenger seat of Celeste's Cadillac. She hadn't tagged the location directly, but the street sign visible through the windshield and the Gallagher Financial Services logo, reflected faintly in her sunglasses, told Vernon's office manager everything she needed to know. Celeste was visible in the driver's seat, adjusting her purse strap. She had no idea she'd just documented her own location at the exact moment she committed federal identity theft. I saved the screenshot to the folder marked August 28th. 2 days later, Celeste would call down to the basement with a glass of wine in her hand and a question in her eyes. The Instagram selfie stayed in my folder. Vernon confirmed the loan had been approved pending final documentation. Soline and Celeste would return to sign in 2 weeks. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Then Celeste called me into the kitchen. 2 days later, on August 9th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she summoned me upstairs. It was the first time she had ever intentionally called me into a room for something other than ordering me to do a chore. She sat alone at the kitchen island with a glass of wine, red and expensive, the bottle beside her, half empty. The afternoon light came through the window behind her, turning her hair gold at the edges. She watched me pass the doorway, then spoke. Lester, come sit. I stopped, turned, walked to the island and poured myself a glass of water from the filtered tap, set it on the granite countertop and sat across from her on one of the tall stools. The leather creaked under my weight. Celeste swirled her wine, watching the liquid catch the light. When she spoke, her voice had none of its usual venom. It was soft, calculated, probing. The facility in Bend is actually quite nice, she said. Private room, garden view. They have activities, social programs. Corbin just wants what's best for you. I took a sip of water. I'm sure he does, Celeste. She studied me over the rim of her glass. You're taking this very well. Most people would be upset. I'm too old to be angry. Are you... She leaned forward slightly. You're not angry that your son thinks you need professional care, that we're making arrangements for your future. I looked at her with the absolute vacancy of expression I'd perfected over 3 months. The blank face of a man too tired to fight, too defeated to care, too old to matter. You're not angry, she asked again. I'm too old to be angry, I repeated. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Celeste stared at me like I was a mechanism she couldn't decode, a watch that refused to tick according to her understanding of how watches should work. She finished her wine in one swallow, stood and carried the glass to the sink. "Well," she said, "that's good. Makes everything easier." She left the room first. That told me everything I needed to know. I finished my water, rinsed the glass, put it back in exactly the same spot, then went downstairs to make one phone call. Vernon answered on the second ring. "She's feeling it," I said. "Good. Scared people make mistakes. We're ready when they do." I opened my logbook and wrote, August 9th, 3 p.m. Celeste probed. Bend facility mentioned directly. Testing for reaction. Gave her nothing. She left first. Then I underscored the last sentence twice. In every negotiation, every confrontation, the person who leaves first is the person who's uncomfortable. Celeste had blinked. 2 days later, on the evening of August 11th, Iris called again. This time, her voice didn't have its usual stillness. "Solene phoned this morning," she said without preamble. "No visit, just a call, direct." I was at my workbench, but I set down the loop and gave her my full attention. What did she want? She asked if you'd mentioned any other bank accounts to me, or any property, if you'd talked about legal matters. Iris paused. Then she asked if I'd let them know if you did. Said they were worried you might make decisions that aren't in your best interest. What did you tell her? I said no, then I hung up. 10 minutes later, I found Iris at the fence line. The dusk light was turning everything amber and gray, the same light that had been there the first morning she'd brought me soup. She stood with both hands on the wooden rail, looking out at nothing in particular. I walked up beside her and stopped. "She's scared," Iris said without looking at me. "Scared people do unpredictable things." "I know. Lester." She turned to face me. "I need to know you're being careful, that you're not taking unnecessary risks, that you're—" I placed my hand over hers on the rail. It was the first time I'd touched her. The first time I'd touched anyone with intentional gentleness since Margaret died 3 months ago. My hand was weathered, calloused from 60 years of watchmaking, spotted with age and scarred from 1,000 small cuts collected over a lifetime of precision work. Hers was smaller, steadier, warm beneath mine. Iris looked down at where my hand covered hers, didn't pull away, didn't speak. "I know," I said again. "That's why we're not waiting anymore." She looked up at me. "What does that mean?" "It means Corbin comes back in 6 days. The party is 12 days after that. Vernon's filing the civil lien 3 days before the party. Everything happens whether they're ready or not. And if they realize what you're doing before then, they won't. They're too busy watching for threats from the outside. They don't see the one that's been living in their basement all along." I looked down at where my hand covered hers. The last time I'd held a woman's hand was Margaret's, in a hospital room, 3 months ago. I hadn't broken any promises. I'd just started keeping one I didn't know I'd made. Iris turned her hand palm up beneath mine, and for just a moment our fingers intertwined. Then she squeezed once and pulled away, stepping back from the fence. "Be careful," she said, "please." "I will." She stepped back through the fence gap without another word, her silhouette dissolving into the kitchen light beyond the oak trees. I stood there holding the rail where her hand had been, feeling the residual warmth in the wood. The sun was setting behind the oak trees. 6 more days until Corbin walked back through the front door with luggage and stories about Paris. 12 days after that until the promotion party. 18 days total. I needed to make sure every gear was aligned before he returned. The civil lien paperwork was ready. The DHS report was filed. The security footage was archived in 3 separate locations. Harrington had the evidence organized into a presentation that would take exactly 17 minutes to deliver. Corbin would return from Paris thinking his plan was proceeding on schedule, thinking the guardianship hearing was still on track, thinking the room in Rosewood was waiting, thinking I was still the helpless old man eating cold leftovers at a plastic table. The taxi from the airport would arrive in less than a week. and with it the news that would set everything in motion. 6 days passed in measured silence. I documented every interaction, logged every movement, and waited for the taxi that would bring the news that changed everything. On August 18th at 4 in the afternoon, the airport taxi pulled back into the driveway, and from the basement window I heard the scrape of luggage wheels across gravel. Corbin entered the living room, beaming with exhaustion and triumph. He dropped his carry-on by the oak table and pulled Solene into an embrace that lasted 5 seconds longer than usual. "Promoted," he said. "Vice President of Credit Risk, effective immediately." Solene squealed. Celeste emerged from the guest room with a wine glass already in hand. Silas ran from the kitchen, jumping and clapping without understanding what the celebration meant. $40,000 raise, Corbin continued. "And my supervisor wants to host a formal celebration here. Saturday night, all the division heads, the compliance team, everyone." For the first 5 minutes, no one noticed me standing near the basement stairs. I watched Corbin accept congratulations, watched Solene immediately pull out her phone to broadcast the news to her followers, watched Celeste refill her wine glass twice. Then Corbin turned and saw me. "Dad?" His voice shifted from celebration to instruction without transition. "Clean the house before Saturday. Deep clean. My colleagues are coming, all of them." I nodded once. "Of course, Corbin." Silas broke away from his mother and ran to me, wrapping his arms around my legs. "Grandpa, did you hear Daddy got promoted?" I put my hand on his head, feeling his hair soft under my palm. "I heard, buddy. That's wonderful." Corbin was already on his phone texting someone. Solene was setting up her ring light for a celebratory video. Celeste was opening another bottle. I watched the embrace for 3 more seconds, then retreated downstairs and opened my logbook. August 18th, 4:15 p.m. Corbin returned. Promoted VP of Credit Risk, $40,000 raise. Party Saturday, August 24th. All colleagues attending. Supervisor present. Venue this house. Saturday, 6 days. VP of Credit Risk. I thought about that title on the way back downstairs. A man who manages credit risk for a living had failed to see the largest risk in his own house. Before I show you the date on that receipt from Rosewood, are you still here with me? Comment. A, if the public confrontation is justified, or B, if he should handle this privately and tell me why in 5 to 8 words. Quick note, what follows includes recreated details for narrative impact. The lesson is what I hope stays with you. Wednesday morning, 3 days before the party, Corbin handed me a printed checklist and a caddy full of cleaning supplies. "Detail the entire house," he said. "I want it spotless. Start upstairs." I worked through the rooms with systematic efficiency. Master bedroom, guest room, bathrooms, hallway. By 2 in the afternoon, I'd reached Corbin's home office, the room he kept locked when he wasn't using it, the room with the desk that held documents he thought were safe. I'd watched him hide the key 6 weeks ago, a Tuesday night late when he thought I was asleep downstairs. He'd stood in the hallway outside his bedroom, reached behind the bookshelf frame near the ceiling molding, and tucked something small into the gap between wood and wall. I retrieved it now. A silver key small enough to fit a desk drawer exactly where I knew it would be. The office was empty. Corbin was at work. Solene was recording content upstairs. Celeste had left for her afternoon errands. I locked the office door from the inside and crossed to the desk. The left drawer opened with a soft click. Inside, file folders organized by date, a checkbook, scattered receipts, and one printed email confirmation paperclip to a brochure. Rosewood Care Home, Bend, Oregon. The letterhead was embossed professional expensive. I read it twice. Confirmation, Lester Thornton, Memory Care, Wing Room 14B, move-in date September 15th, 2024. Family Representative Corbin Thornton. Deposit paid $3,200 non-refundable. Balance due upon admission $6,400 first and last month. Monthly rate $3,200. The deposit had cleared from the household account 3 weeks ago. I'd seen the transaction in the bank statement Vernon had photographed listed as medical services. They'd already paid for my room. They were so certain I'd be there that they'd committed money they couldn't get back. I pulled out my phone and photographed the document from 3 angles, sent all 3 images directly to Douglas Harrington's secure email with the subject line, Rosewood Confirmation, September 15th. Then I replaced the paper in its exact position paperclip, aligned the same way file folder closed at the same angle, locked the drawer, returned the key to its hiding place behind the bookshelf molding, picked up my dust cloth and furniture polish. 3 weeks. They had already paid for my room. I set the dust cloth down and sat in Corbin's chair, the big leather one he'd bought with my money. It fit me perfectly. I sat there for exactly 2 minutes. Then I stood up, straightened the chair, and went back to dusting. By the time Corbin came home that evening, the office was spotless. The desk gleamed. The shelves were organized. The key was back in the molding where it had been for 6 weeks. And I was in the basement adding a new entry to my logbook. August 21st. Rosewood Confirmation located. Room 14B. Move-in September 15th, 2024. Deposit paid $3,200 non-refundable 3 weeks from today. Evidence photographed and forwarded to Harrington. Key returned to original location. Corbin unaware. I underscored the move-in date 3 times. September 15th. Memory care wing. Room 14B. The room had a number now. It had a date. It had a deposit they couldn't get back. They were so certain I'd be there that they'd already committed financially. But they didn't know Saturday night would come first. They didn't know Douglas Harrington had already filed the civil lien with Multnomah County that afternoon, effective immediately upon recording. They didn't know Vernon had 3 separate camera angles of Solene and Celeste committing identity theft. They didn't know Iris had documentation of their harassment. They didn't know anything except what they'd convinced themselves was true, that I was helpless, isolated, and too old to fight back. 3 more days, 72 hours until Corbin's promotion party filled this house with his colleagues, his supervisor, and every witness I'd need. 3 more days, 72 hours until Corbin's promotion party filled this house with his colleagues, his supervisor, and every witness I'd need. Friday morning arrived. The house was clean. The evidence was photographed. The civil lien was recorded. Everything was aligned. Then Vernon called at 9:15. The bank conducted an internal audit, he said without preamble. Cascade Regional's Compliance Division. After your documentation triggered their fraud protocols, they launched a full review of Corbin's department. I set down the loop I'd been holding, and they found what you found, Lester. 3 specific transactions totaling $47,000 from accounts bearing your name, all lacking proper authorization documentation. But now it's their problem too. Institutional liability. The bank may have to testify independently. So tomorrow isn't just family business anymore. No, Vernon's voice was quiet. Tomorrow's a reckoning. We talked for another 20 minutes about logistics and timing. When we hung up, I sat at my workbench without moving. The digital clock on the shelf read 11:47. I'd been sitting motionless for over 2 hours. My coffee had gone cold. The logbook was still open to page 31, the entry from Father's Day night, the first time I'd written down what was happening. I closed the book with both hands, feeling the weight of the leather binding. Then I locked it in the desk drawer. I wouldn't open it again until after tomorrow. That evening at 7:30, I walked through the fence gap into Iris's backyard. She was tending her tomato plants, the late August light turning everything amber. When she saw me, she set down her gardening shears and wiped her hands on her jeans. Tomorrow, she said, not a question. Tomorrow. I sat on her porch steps. She sat beside me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. How long were you and Margaret married? She asked. 41 years. When did you know Corbin had changed? I thought about that. The first time he told me a business decision was more important than a promise. He was 26. He'd promised to help me at the shop, then called to say a client meeting came up. It wasn't the cancellation. It was the way he said it, like I should understand that money trumps everything else. Iris nodded. My husband was a judge for 30 years. He used to say the saddest cases weren't the ones with clear villains. They were the ones where good people chose money over each other, one small decision at a time. Is that what tomorrow is about? I asked. Money? No. She looked at me with steady eyes. You're not doing this because you're angry. You're doing it because you're heartbroken. Maybe it's the same thing. No, sweetheart, she said softly. It's not. The word hung in the evening air. Sweetheart. Margaret used to call me that. No one had since. I'm proud of what you're doing, Iris continued. Not the exposing part, the documenting, the precision, the refusal to let cruelty be invisible. Tomorrow changes everything, I said. For Silas, for all of them. Promise me something. Promise me you'll come home afterward, no matter how it goes. I promise. She reached over and took my hand. We sat there as the sun set, not saying anything else, just being present in the last quiet moment before everything changed. Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, Vernon arrived with a black canvas bag containing the projector and laptop. We set everything up in the basement, tested the connection, ran through the slide deck one final time. 17 minutes of documentation organized chronologically. Then I stopped on slide 8. This one needs to change, I said. Vernon looked at the screen. The slide header read, Evidence of Embezzlement. What's wrong with it? Silas is going to be upstairs during this. I won't have him hear that word associated with his father. Vernon started to argue, then stopped. You're protecting him even now. I'm protecting Silas, I said. There's a difference. Is there? I edited 3 slides changing embezzlement to unauthorized transfers, changing fraud to undocumented transactions. The meaning stayed the same. The legal impact stayed the same. But a 4-year-old boy wouldn't have to remember the moment his grandfather called his father a criminal. Vernon packed the projector back into its case, checked his watch. Party starts at 6, he said. We should arrive at 5:45. While he worked, I picked up the small screwdriver from my workbench, the one I'd used to repair Corbin's first wristwatch 34 years ago when he was 8, and had dropped it on concrete and came to me crying. I turned it slowly in my palm, feeling the worn rubber grip, then set it back in its precise position in the tool rack. Vernon watched but said nothing. He zipped the bag closed, looked at me. You okay? I looked at the packed equipment, the edited slides, the locked drawer containing 47 pages of documentation, the basement room where I'd lived for 3 months like a ghost. Ask me in 9 hours, I said. The countdown had started. In 9 hours, Corbin would be standing in his living room celebrating his promotion, surrounded by colleagues and supervisors believing he'd successfully hidden everything. In 9 hours, I would plug in a projector and show them all exactly what Vice President of Credit Risk Corbin Thornton had been doing to his own father while managing institutional risk for a living. 9 hours. That was all the time left in the world where my son still thought he'd won. The plastic chair feels colder than it did this morning. I sit at 5:50 p.m. in the corner of Corbin's living room watching Soline arrange champagne flutes on the kitchen island in geometric precision while Corbin adjusts his tie in the hallway mirror. The 75-inch television dominates the wall above the electric fireplace. Vernon texted 20 minutes ago, "Equipment staged in my trunk. Wait for your signal." My phone sits in my palm screen, dark thumb hovering over the message thread. Celine walks past me to the kitchen without acknowledgement. She's wearing a burgundy cocktail dress I've never seen before. The price tag probably matched my monthly pharmacy budget. Corbin emerges from the hallway in charcoal slacks and a pressed white shirt. He glances at me, then looks away. "Father, you'll stay in that corner during introductions. These are professional colleagues." I nod. My voice would crack if I tried to speak. The doorbell rings at 6:02 p.m. Martin Kepler enters first, Corbin's division chief, 50-something with silver temples and a Brooks Brothers suit. Behind him, Sharon Dietrich, the compliance officer. I met at last year's holiday mixer carrying a wrapped bottle and 3 other colleagues whose names Corbin announces with practiced enthusiasm. 13 people eventually fill the living room. The jazz playlist Solene curated competes with overlapping conversations about Q2 earnings and upcoming audits. I watch from my corner. Kepler shakes Corbin's hand. Youngest VP in Pacific Northwest history. Your father must be proud. Corbin steers him toward the bar cart before he can approach me. Celeste arrives at 6:17 p.m. in a cream silk blouse and pearl necklace. She kisses Solene's cheeks, accepts a champagne flute, scans the room until her eyes land on me. Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. This is calibrated cruelty. The party isn't about celebration, it's about contrast. Look at Corbin's success. Look at his father in the corner. At 6:40 p.m., Solene carries a plate of bruschetta from the kitchen. She stops 3 feet from my chair, her heel catching the edge of the area rug. The plate tilts. 4 napkins slide off, landing near my feet. 1 touches my shoe. She doesn't bend to retrieve them. Lester, clean that up. Her voice carries across the room. Conversations pause. Kepler turns. Sharon Dietrich's eyebrows lift. I look down at the crumpled napkins, greasy stains darkening the linen. My chest tightens. I lean forward, reaching for the closest one. Sorry about that. Corbin appears beside Kepler, wineglass in hand, voice apologetic but detached. My father's staying with us during a transitional period. He's not quite mentally present. We're managing it. Kepler nods slowly. Sharon looks away. The conversations resume at lower volume. I collect the napkins, folding them into a tight square. Solene has already returned to the kitchen. I sit back in the plastic chair. My hands shake. The napkins rest in my lap, oil seeping through the fabric onto my khakis. Celeste watches from across the room, champagne flute raised to her lips. I pull my phone from my pocket. The screen illuminates. Vernon's thread appears. I type 2 letters, now. The message sends at 6:43 p.m. 23 minutes pass. Kepler tells a story about a merger negotiation. Corbin laughs on cue. Solene refills glasses. Silas is absent, staying with Celeste's sister tonight, Solene mentioned earlier. The doorbell rings at 7:06 p.m. Corbin frowns. Everyone's here already. He crosses to the door, opens it. Vernon stands on the threshold in a navy blazer, carrying a leather portfolio and a compact projector case. Vernon. Corbin's confusion is genuine. I didn't. Surprise guest. Vernon's smile is warm, disarming. Your father asked me to prepare a small promotion gift, something about financial accountability and legacy. He steps inside before Corbin can object. The room quiets. Kepler watches with interest. Vernon sets the projector on the coffee table, begins connecting cables to the television. This'll just take a moment. Everyone loves a surprise at a party, especially when it promises sentiment. Corbin looks at me. I meet his eyes for the first time in 8 weeks. His expression shifts confusion to suspicion to something close to alarm. Solene moves to his side. What is this? Her voice has an edge. Vernon doesn't answer. He's focused on the projector, adjusting the angle. The television screen flickers. The jazz playlist continues. Celeste sets her champagne on the mantel, arms crossing. The screen fills with white. Then black text appears, centered stark against the background. $900 per month times 18 months equals $16,200. Where Corbin Thornton's father's rent money went. Below the headline, 18 rows. Each row shows a date, an amount, and a destination. Celeste Marie Voss, JP Morgan account ending in 4739. April 2024 through August 2024. Every transfer documented, every dollar accounted for. The amounts vary: $900, $850, $920. But the pattern is unbroken. In the bottom right corner, a small notation: Source First Commerce Bank records authenticated by Vernon Gallagher CPA. The room goes silent. The jazz keeps playing saxophone and piano oblivious. 13 pairs of eyes move from the screen to Corbin to Celeste. Kepler's expression is unreadable. Sharon Dietrich's face has gone carefully neutral. Corbin's mouth opens. No sound emerges. Celeste's champagne flute tilts in her hand. The liquid sloshes, catching light from the fireplace but doesn't spill. Her knuckles are white. Corbin opens his mouth to speak, but Vernon clicks the remote without looking at him. Slide 2 fills the screen. 3 images side by side. High-resolution scans of shredded paper reconstructed like a jigsaw puzzle. Each piece shows fragments of text. First Commerce Credit Union letterhead. My name typed in the address block, red-stamped warnings about overdue balances. The dates span September through November 2023. I remember finding them in the recycling bin last winter, taped back together at my workbench under the magnifying lamp. The center image shows a deposit slip, $2,400 transferred from my savings to cover debts I never incurred. In the bottom corner, Vernon's notation reads, account holder unaware of charges statements intercepted before delivery. Soline's champagne flute hits the kitchen island. The crystal rings out high and sharp. No one turns to look. All eyes stay locked on the screen. Slide 3 appears. A single document, legal size, with highlighter marks on the reverse of page 3. Lease agreement dated July 2nd, 2024, signed by Corbin Thornton and Soline R. Thornton. Clause 14b is enlarged in the center. Tenant violation of property use restrictions, financial exploitation of co-residing family member, or unauthorized encumbrance of lessor assets triggers immediate breach and treble damages under ORS 90.380. Soline's signature sits 2 inches below the text, looping S confident R, dated and notarized. Douglas helped me draft that clause in May. Corbin never read past page 2. Kepler shifts his weight. He's no longer holding his wine glass. I can see his jaw working the way compliance officers look when they're mentally drafting incident reports. Slide 4 is video. Silent footage from a glass-walled office, time-stamped August 7th, 2024, 2:14 p.m. Soline and Celeste sit across a desk from a man in shirt sleeves, Gallagher Financial, the logo visible on the door behind them. Celeste slides a folder across the desk. The loan officer opens it, scans the contents, nods. Soline signs 3 pages. The officer shakes both their hands. The frame freezes on the final signature line, zoomed in Social Security number ending in 7743. My number. The application amount, $50,000. The video quality is too sharp to dispute. Vernon pulled it from the firm's cloud backup after Iris identified the location from a photo on Celeste's Facebook. The audio begins before slide 5 appears. It comes through the ceiling speakers, the same system that's been playing jazz all night. Soline's voice, clear and unhurried, fills the living room. Just use the old man's name. He dies, debt dies. Mom and I spend first. A pause. Then Celeste's laugh, low and satisfied. He won't last 2 more winters. The recording quality is perfect. They were sitting in this kitchen when they said it, May 30th, late afternoon. I was in my basement room directly below, listening through the HVAC vent, directly above my basement workbench, the same vent I'd reported to Corbin 3 times as broken, and he'd never fixed. I was a legal tenant in this dwelling. I heard their conversation through an open ventilation system while present in my own home. Oregon law has no objection to a man hearing what echoes through his own ceiling.
Slide 5 appears now, a waveform graphic synced to the audio timestamps in the corner, my own transcription typed beneath their words in courier font. The recording runs 18 seconds. When it ends, the silence is absolute. The jazz playlist has stopped. I didn't notice when.
Corbin's face is red. He takes a half step toward Vernon. That's out of context. Kepler's voice cuts through quiet and cold. Don't say another word.
Corbin freezes. Kepler hasn't moved, but his posture has changed. Shoulders squared, chin slightly down. It's the stance he used at last year's ethics hearing when a junior analyst tried to explain away unreported conflicts. Sharon Dietrich sets her wine glass on the mantel beside Celeste's abandoned champagne. She's standing near the door now. 3 other colleagues have moved closer to the exit. I count 17 guests in the room. 4 are still holding drinks. Kepler straightens his cuffs. His voice remains level, almost gentle. You're terminated, Corbin, effective immediately. Our legal team will contact you Monday. Don't come to the office. Don't log into the system. Don't call anyone. He looks at Solene, then back at Corbin. You'll want a lawyer, a good one. Corbin's mouth works. No sound comes out. Solene grabs his arm. Her burgundy dress has a wine stain near the hem I didn't notice before. A man in a navy suit steps forward from near the hallway. I recognize him. Daniel Crawford, senior partner at Douglas's firm, late 40s, with silver-framed glasses and a leather document folio. He was standing against the wall this whole time watching. Not a party guest. A courier. Mr. Thornton. Crawford addresses Corbin with professional detachment. He opens the folio, produces a stack of paper, hands it across. Corbin doesn't take it. Crawford sets it on the coffee table beside Vernon's projector. These documents were filed Wednesday with the Multnomah County Recorder. Civil lien against this property under ORS 124.110. Clause 14B of your lease agreement has been triggered. Treble damages apply. Celine snatches the papers. Her hands shake as she flips through them. Each page bears an official stamp, blue ink, county seal, Wednesday's date. You can't, we own, you don't. Crawford's tone doesn't change. The mortgage note was sold to Pacific Timepiece Holdings, LLC on August 19th. The LLC filed foreclosure proceedings on August 21st. Under ORS 90.427, you are the tenant in this property, not the owner. Formal displacement proceedings have been initiated. You will receive written notice of all timelines through proper legal channels. The basement dwelling unit remains occupied by its lawful tenant pending civil suit resolution. Corbin stares at Crawford. His voice comes out hoarse. This is our house. Crawford closes his folio. It was. The lien and foreclosure documents are public record. Your mortgage lender received notice of default in July. Pacific Timepiece Holdings acquired the note at a foreclosure auction. Everything is recorded. Pacific Timepiece Holdings. Vernon filed the LLC papers in my name in June, the week after the security footage confirmed Solene's signature at Gallagher Financial. We bought the note for 62 cents on the dollar. The bank was eager to unload it. I reach into my pocket. My fingers close around the watch loop brass, warm against my palm. The edges are worn smooth from 60 years of use, my father's before it was mine. It feels heavier tonight than it's ever been, denser, like the small things that measure precision have taken on weight they were never designed to carry. I stand. The plastic chair scrapes against the hardwood. 17 faces turn toward me. I hold the loop between my thumb and forefinger, rolling it slowly, watching the overhead light catch the curved glass. Corbin's face drains white. Soline's mouth opens, but no sound emerges. Celeste hasn't moved from her position near the fireplace, one hand still gripping the mantle. I turn the loop again. The room waits. The second courier doesn't look at Corbin. He walks straight through the front door toward the porch where Celeste stands frozen, one hand clutching her pearl necklace. Marcus Howell, slate gray uniform and asset seizure paperwork clipped to a leather folio, stops 2 feet from her. Behind him, a flatbed tow truck idles in the driveway, amber lights rotating slowly. Mrs. Voss, Howell's voice is flat professional. Asset seizure order for the 2023 Cadillac Escalade, Oregon plate, BKM 4739. Funds traced to account flagged for recovery under civil lien proceedings. Vehicle purchased March 16, 2024. Payment source matches diverted rent funds documented in Multnomah County filing. Celeste's hand drops from the necklace. Her mouth opens. No sound emerges. Howell nods toward the driveway. The tow operator climbs from his cab, begins positioning the flatbed behind the Escalade, cream exterior, chrome trim still gleaming under the porch lights. Guests spill through the front door onto the driveway. Wine glasses forgotten inside, drawn by the mechanical whine of the winch cable. The truck bed tilts. The operator hooks the front axle, activates the hydraulics. The Escalade rises slowly, rear wheels lifting off asphalt suspended at a 20-degree angle. Someone's phone camera flashes. Sharon Dietrich stands near the mailbox with her arms crossed, watching without expression. Howell hands Celeste a sealed envelope. Separate civil matter, Nevada creditors. Service papers Monday morning at this address. He turns, walks back to his sedan parked behind the tow truck, slides into the driver's seat without waiting for acknowledgement. The flatbed pulls away at 8:04 p.m. Celeste stands on the porch holding the envelope, her cream silk blouse catching the breeze. For the first time in 3 months, she has nothing to say. The guests scatter within 6 minutes. Kepler leaves first, Sharon Dietrich 30 seconds behind him. The others follow in pairs, murmuring apologies, avoiding eye contact. By 8:12 p.m., the driveway is empty except for Corbin's Audi and Vernon's sedan. The house goes quiet. Jazz playlist still paused. Someone's half-empty champagne flute sits abandoned on the mantel. Corbin drops to his knees on the hardwood floor. The sound is sharp bone meeting wood without cushion. He reaches for Soline, pulls her down beside him. Her burgundy dress pools around her legs. "Dad, please, we have Silas. We have nowhere to go." I walk to the oak dining table, pull 3 sets of papers from the portfolio Vernon left on the credenza. Each set is notarized, dated Thursday. I place them on the table in a row. Sign the inheritance waiver, all 3 of you, then move to the basement. $1,200 a month applied to restitution. Silas stays upstairs with me. Keeps his school district, his bedroom, his routine. Soline's voice cracks. "You can't take our son. He's not going anywhere. You are. Single offer. Expires in 10 minutes. Celeste moves from the porch into the living room. She's still holding Howell's envelope. Her face has aged 10 years in the last hour. "Where am I supposed to?" "You have $340,000 in Vegas debt and no vehicle." I keep my voice level. Vernon found the credit statements 2 weeks ago buried in her email drafts. MGM Grand Caesars win. Marker after marker, compounding interest since 2022. Basement is warm and dry. Criminal referral held back 30 days if all 3 signatures are on these documents before the deadline. After that, I forward everything to the district attorney. The oak table where they served Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago now holds 3 signatures on settlement documents, ink still drying. Celeste signed firsthand, shaking so hard the letters blurred. Soline, second tears falling onto the page. Corbin picked up the pen at 9 minutes 40 seconds, wrote his name in the same confident script he used on the lease 18 months ago. Vernon packs his projector at 8:31 p.m. He stops beside me near the door, squeezes my shoulder once. Call if you need anything. I nod. He leaves without looking back. The moving begins in silence. Corbin carries armloads of clothes down the basement stairs. Soline follows with shoe boxes, makeup cases, the framed photo from their honeymoon in Cannon Beach. Celeste makes 3 trips each time, slower than the last. The basement has its own entrance, its own bathroom, a kitchenette I never used. 1,200 square feet. The same space they confined me to while they lived in luxury above. Silas appears in the upstairs hallway at 8:47 p.m. He's wearing his dinosaur pajamas, the blue ones with the T-Rex on the chest. I'm setting a cardboard box in the master bedroom, my clothes, my watch, tools, the leather journal I kept hidden under the basement mattress for 18 months. He stands in the doorway, small and confused. Grandpa, are you staying up here now? Yes, buddy, I'm staying. He looks around the room, king bed with the tufted headboard bay window overlooking the garden ensuite bathroom with heated floors. The room Soline chose when they first bought the house. Where's Mommy and Daddy? Downstairs. They're going to live in the basement for a while. His forehead wrinkles. 4 years old trying to process the inversion. Can I sleep up here tonight with you? I survey the room as its true owner for the first time. The bed is large enough for 2. The window shows stars above the neighbor's oak tree. This floor belongs to me now. To us. It's your house too, Silas. He climbs onto the bed without asking. Again burrows under the comforter, still smelling faintly of Soline's lavender detergent. I sit on the edge of the mattress the way I sat beside 5-year-old Corbin 30 years ago in a different house in a different city, watching him sleep after his mother died, believing the boy would grow into someone kind, believing love and patience would be enough. Silas's breathing slows. His chest rises and falls in the steady rhythm of child sleep, untroubled and complete. 10 minutes and he's gone. From below, muffled sounds drift through the heating vents. Footsteps crossing the basement floor. A closet door closing. Soline's voice distant and hollow, asking where to put the winter coats. Corbin's answer too quiet to parse. The sounds filter up through ductwork and floorboards, not imagination, not metaphor, but proof. The family that humiliated me for 18 months now lives beneath my feet, learning what the floor feels like from underneath. I sit in the darkness beside my grandson, listening to the house settle into its new order, wondering if this feeling in my chest is vindication or something I don't have a name for yet. I wake at 5 Sunday morning, muscle memory pulling me toward the basement stairs. My hand reaches for the doorknob before I remember. I turn instead, walk up the hall to the main kitchen. 18 months of down now, permanently reversed to up. Silas is still asleep in the master bedroom. I leave the door cracked, move quietly to the kitchen. Granite Island gas range double ovens. I open the refrigerator, pull out eggs, milk, butter, pancakes, buttermilk, vanilla flip when the bubbles don't close. Silas appears at 5:47 a.m. Pajamas, wrinkled hair standing up on one side. He climbs onto a stool at the island leg, swinging above the footrest. Morning, buddy. Morning, Grandpa. He watches me flip a pancake. You're cooking up here now. I am. Can I have chocolate chips in mine? I find a bag in the pantry press, 5 chips into the batter. The pancake comes out lopsided, Donald Duck-shaped by accident. He grins, drowns it in syrup, cuts it into triangles. From below, muffled voices rise through the heating vents. Soline's tone sharp-clipped. Corbin's response lower defensive. I can't make out words, only cadence. Silas glances at the floor fork, pausing. Are Mom and Dad okay down there? I slide another pancake onto his plate. They're fine, buddy, learning something new. He tilts his head. Like when I learned to ride my bike. Exactly like that. I set a glass of milk beside his plate. Sometimes people need to start over. He nods, satisfied, returns to his pancakes. He eats everything, asks for more. I make 2 additional pancakes. He finishes those too. The morning light through the upper kitchen window hits the island counter at a different angle than the basement fluorescence ever did. Warmer, softer, like the house itself has changed temperature. Silas hums while he eats. His legs swing in rhythm. The voices below have stopped. The week following the party, my phone vibrates constantly. Texts, calls, voicemails stacking faster than I can clear them. Extended family I haven't heard from in years suddenly urgent with questions. On Tuesday morning, I discover why. Soline's live feed captured the first 4 minutes of Vernon's presentation before she cut the connection. The recording went viral through the extended family network. Cousins shared it. In-laws forwarded it. By Wednesday 47, people have watched Vernon's opening slide and Soline's recorded voice admitting the plan. Someone screen recorded it before she could delete the original. Now it circulates beyond my control, a permanent digital artifact of her own exposure. Relatives call asking why I didn't come to them sooner. Soline's uncle, retired CPA in Beaverton, offers to testify if I pursue criminal charges. Corbin's childhood neighbor texts expressing shock. 3 different cousins ask for copies of the full presentation. I decline. The viral clip is sufficient. Thursday afternoon, my phone rings with a number I recognize. Martin Kepler. I almost let it go to voicemail. At the last second, I answer. Mr. Thornton. His voice is formal, measured. I'm calling to express the firm's gratitude. Your documentation triggered an internal review. We've uncovered 4 additional fraudulent files in Corbin's department clients. He misrepresented assets he redirected. Your case exposed systemic issues we would have missed for months. I sit at the desk in the upper-level study. I wasn't trying to help the firm. I understand, but you did. Thank you. He hangs up. I stare at the screen until it goes dark. 4 additional files. 4 other people Corbin defrauded while climbing his career ladder. The confrontation wasn't just personal vindication. It dismantled corruption I didn't know existed. Friday evening, the basement intercom buzzes. Celeste's voice crackles through the speaker. Lester, we need to discuss modification of the terms. I press the button, cutting her off. Arrangement stands. $1,200 per month applied to debt. Negotiation goes through the lawyer. You can't possibly expect us to... I release the button. Her voice cuts off. I don't press it again. She tries twice more over the next hour. I ignore both. Sunday morning, she stops. Saturday night, my phone vibrates with a text. Corbin's name appears. 4 words. I'm sorry, Dad. I read it once. Set the phone down. Pick it up an hour later, read it again. The words sit there unadorned, offering nothing beyond themselves. No explanation, no excuse, just apology stripped to its skeleton. I don't reply. Sunday, I read it twice more. Monday evening, a 4th time. The last time Corbin apologized for something real, not social nicety, not performative contrition, but genuine acknowledgement of harm. Silas wasn't born yet, and I still believed contrition meant change. That was 8 years ago. He'd borrowed money, promised to repay it within 6 months, let 2 years pass before I stopped asking. The text sits unanswered in my phone. 4 words. 18 months of documentation, 5 slides of evidence, 1 night of public reckoning, and the response is 4 words sent via text 3 days later. I sit at the desk, Tuesday evening, phone in my hand. Corbin's message glows on the screen. I've read it 4 times over 3 days. Each time the same 4 words. Each time the same question underneath, does sorry mean anything when it arrives after consequences instead of before? I set the phone face down on the desk. Not yet time to answer, maybe not ever. The apology is noted, filed away with everything else I've documented. Whether I choose to respond and what reconciliation might require remains unresolved. For now, the silence is sufficient. The house has settled into its new order. Upstairs, Silas and me. Downstairs, the people who put me there first. The inversion is complete, and I'm still learning what it means to live with what I've built. The adhesive scrapes off the window glass in long, stubborn strips. I use a razor blade angled at 30 degrees, working in short strokes. The letters beneath emerge gradually. Thornton and Sons established, 1986. Margaret's font choice from a catalog she spent 2 weeks comparing. Vernon steadies the ladder behind me, one hand on the aluminum frame. Below, Iris watches from the sidewalk, arms crossed against the October chill. Silas scampers around tool crates, investigating hinges on a shipping box. I parked in front of the shop 20 minutes ago, engine idling, staring at that adhesive. 4 months since I locked the door and walked away. 4 months of believing this place was finished, that Corbin's choices had closed more than just my bank account. The truck sat in park for 3 full minutes before I turned the key and climbed out. Vernon arrived 10 minutes later with the ladder. Iris showed up 5 minutes after that, holding coffee in a thermos and a bag of pastries, Silas already half demolished in the car. None of them asked if I was sure. They just showed up. The last piece of adhesive comes free. I climb down, fold the ladder, lean it against the brick. Vernon hands me the sign, the original stored in his garage since June. Solid oak hand-routed edges, the gold leaf lettering Margaret insisted on, even though it cost twice the vinyl. I climb back up position. The brackets thread the mounting hardware through holes that still fit perfectly after 38 years. Below the historical name, smaller text in modern sans serif and Silas someday. Vernon added it last week without asking. I saw the proof yesterday, nodded once. He understood. Silas looks up from the crates. Grandpa, what does someday mean? Means you'll work here when you're older, if you want. Will I fix watches too? If you want, or something else, your choice. He grins, returns to the crates. The concept of someday doesn't bother 4-year-olds. It's just another word. Vernon holds the sign steady while I tighten the bolts. Margaret would have liked this. She chose the font. I know, I was there. The sign hangs level. I climb down, step back to the curb beside Iris. The storefront looks exactly like it did the day we opened, before Corbin, before the villa, before any of this. The glass is cleaner. The brick could use repointing. But the bones are the same. Inside the shop smells like machine oil and old wood and 38 years of accumulated watchmaker residue, metal dust solvent. The particular mustiness of leather straps aging in drawers. My workbench sits against the back wall, untouched since June. The jeweler's lamp, the movement holder, the plastic parts trays arranged by size. I sit on the stool, pull the drawer open. The 1962 Omega rests in tissue paper where I left it, crown wheel broken, waiting for a part I ordered 3 days before everything collapsed. The part arrived in July, forwarded to Vernon's address. He hands it to me, now small envelope with the supplier's logo. I open it, tip the crown wheel into my palm. Brass 0.4 millimeters, $32 including shipping. I set it beside the movement holder, unwrap the Omega, begin the disassembly I started 4 months ago. The case back unscrews with familiar resistance. The movement lifts free. My hands remember the sequence without thinking. The 1962 Omega sits in my palm exactly as it did 4 months ago. Same weight, same scratched crystal, same broken crown wheel, but my hands feel steadier now. Not because the shaking stopped, because I know what they're capable of building and dismantling both. I install the crown wheel in 8 minutes, reassemble the movement in 12. The watch ticks when I wind it smooth, mechanical, alive. I set it on the desk, listen to the seconds pass. 38 years, and the sound still satisfies something in my chest I can't name. Silas presses his face to the shop window, breath fogging the glass. I wave. He waves back. That night, I sit at the study desk in the upper floor. The house is quiet. Silas asleep in his room across the hall, the basement occupants silent below. I open the desk drawer, pull out clean vellum and the fountain pen Margaret gave me for our 15th anniversary. Blue ink, fine nib. I haven't used it in 6 years. I write by hand. No email, no digital record. Just ink on paper the way accountability used to be delivered before screens made everything feel temporary. The letter is short, 1 paragraph. I don't know where I went wrong raising you, but I know where I went wrong letting you treat me like I was already gone. That won't happen again to either of us. I sign it. Fold the page in thirds, slide it into an envelope, seal it, write Corbin's name on the front. No address needed. He's 40 feet below me. Margaret used to say the words you swallow are the ones that stay lodged in your chest forever, calcifying into bitterness. She said it after her father died without apologizing for 20 years of cruelty. She said it again when Corbin was 16 and I caught him stealing from the register $50 he never admitted taking. I stayed silent, then hoping he'd confess on his own. He never did. The $50 became 100, became 1,000, became 18 months in a basement room while he lived upstairs in comfort purchased with my savings. This time I write it down, not because I expect it to change him, not because I think words on paper reverse decades of choices. I write it because Margaret was right. The words I don't say will calcify. The ones I do, whether he reads them or not, belong to me. I wrote this letter for myself as much as for Corbin. Maybe more. The apology he sent 3 days ago sits unanswered on my phone. This is my answer not to his sorry, but to the question of what comes next. Boundaries, accountability, words I refuse to swallow anymore. I walk down the stairs to the basement entrance, envelope in hand. The door is closed, no light visible underneath. I don't know if Corbin is awake. Don't know if he'll read it tonight, next week, or ever. Don't know if it matters. I kneel, slide the envelope under the door. It disappears with barely a sound, paper on tile crossing the threshold between floors. I stand, turn, walk back up the stairs without pausing. No waiting for sound. No listening for reaction. The letter is delivered. What Corbin does with it belongs to him. What I needed to say is finally free. November settles over Portland with rain and amber leaves clinging to wet pavement. The kind of chill that works into stone and bone. 3 months since the party. 3 months since I stopped living beneath anyone's floor. The days have rhythm now. Mornings at the shop bench spiral hairspring coiled between tweezers. Silas arrives after school most afternoons, settles at the display counter to do homework while I work. He asks questions about gears. I answer when I can. Sometimes we sit in comfortable silence, both focused on small repairs. Afternoons we return to the villa. Iris is often there when we arrive, chopping vegetables or setting the table for 3. She has her own key now. Took the spare from the hook one Tuesday in October and never gave it back. I didn't ask her to. Vernon calls on a Wednesday evening. The bank settled. $85,000 in your favor. Civil fraud claim. I'm at the kitchen sink looking out at the garden. Put it in Silas's college fund. All of it. All of it. 529 plan. Whatever gets him through 4 years without debt. I don't need it, Vernon. I need him not to start adult life the way Corbin did, entitled soft thinking money comes without work. He exhales slowly. Restricted access until he's 18. I'll set it up. Before hanging up, Vernon mentions one more thing. Celeste secured a position as intake cashier at a commercial casino in Wilsonville, overnight shift, minimum wage. She'll take the bus. The Escalade is gone. Nevada creditors are still pursuing her. It'll take years. $85,000 transformed into something Corbin can't touch, Solene can't spend, Celeste can't steal. 18 years from now, Silas will open an acceptance letter and know his grandfather made sure he could go. Late evening, Iris sits in the armchair beside my workbench. She's reading on her tablet, legs tucked beneath her glasses perched on her nose. I'm finishing the 1962 Omega, the one I started in June and finally returned to in October. The movement is clean now, regulated cased. I set it on the felt pad, watch the second hand sweep. Smooth, even, true. What's the most complicated watch you've ever repaired? Iris asks. A man doesn't need a complicated watch, I say. He needs a watch that tells the truth. She tilts her head. Is that what you did this year? No. I pick up the loop, turn it between my fingers. I made sure everyone could finally read what time it actually was. She nods, returns to her reading. I set the completed Omega on the shelf beside Margaret's photograph, black and white, 1985, the year before we opened the shop. The watch sits beside her frame, second hand moving, clean, even, true. Iris leaves at 9:30, kisses my cheek at the door, and disappears into the November rain. I return to the study, open the brown leather logbook I started Father's Day night, 5 months ago. I turn past pages filled with dates, dollar amounts, blue ink documentation, and reach the final entry, Rosewood. Bend. 30 days. Underlined twice. I turn to the next page. Clean. I write 2 words, day 1. Maybe recovery, maybe forgiveness, maybe just the first page of whatever comes after justice. I close the notebook beside the Omega. 1 counting forward, 1 documenting what's past. Both necessary, both true. I click off the lamp and walk toward Silas's room. His door is cracked. I hear his breathing steady, even untroubled by anything adults carry. A watchmaker knows you can't rush repair. You do the work one piece at a time until the hands finally move true. My hands finally started moving, not fast, not perfectly, but forward. For now that is enough, for now that is everything. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Silence isn't always weakness, sometimes it's strategy. Looking back, I made mistakes. I trusted too easily. I signed that lease without reading every line because I wanted to believe my son had changed. I stayed quiet for too long, enduring humiliation in that basement room while they lived upstairs in comfort I'd paid for. Don't make my mistake. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time. Documentation saved me, but awareness could have protected me sooner. The lesson I learned through this family betrayal revenge wasn't about anger, it was about precision. When you're facing family betrayal, revenge through the courts is more permanent than revenge through arguments. I documented everything, every dollar, every lie, every overheard conversation. When family betrayal cuts deep, your revenge must be methodical, legal, and irrefutable. I believe God gave me the patience to wait, the clarity to document, and the strength to stand up when the moment arrived. Justice delayed isn't justice denied. Sometimes it's justice prepared. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Tell me, was I right to expose them publicly, or should I have handled it privately? If you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to Dad Silent Revenge. These stories matter because your truth matters. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything to me. One final note. Certain details in this story have been fictionalized to protect identities and emphasize the lesson. What remains true is the message, and I hope it stays with you.